Everybody, today we are going to start. If you want to, you can use paint on your holiday card project. I'm going to show you guys how to do a demo with watercolors, just because last year you guys were a little bit heavy-handed with how thick that you applied the paint, and I want to show that you guys can actually do a lot of different layering and mixing and using of those techniques that we practiced on the last video that we had on watercolor. So this is actually one of the pictures that my father provided. These are some of the exact same ones that you guys have available. I have this like gray blue up top. These are really subtle colors, so you're gonna have to like think about them for a while. And it transforms into this like gray peach color. I have mostly whites, a little bit of grays, typically more back in these darker ones back in the back. I have a little bit of pure white that I wanted to save, and then I also have this rich, it's like a brown black color, white and grays, and then this nice just like straight black. I would probably mix a blue and a black together just to make this color. So this is basically what I'm going to be mixing for. Now once you guys start transferring your image to it, I didn't actually have to do too terribly much. I added the road in there, I added the horizon line, I added in my tree trunks for sure. I added a couple of these outlines of these bushes and these small trees. But then I focused more on some of the really evident branches that happens like right in there that you can see they're really strong. But I also ignored them where I saw these white patches that showed up. So anywhere that I wanted, I drew all that information, and then after that I focused on where I had my pure whites, because if you're doing watercolor, you guys can also use that resist technique to basically save those whites without like going back later and saying, oh, I gotta carve into the paper or add some other type of material over top of it. So I did those whites, and now I'm going to start on the color. So whenever I pull up this, you can see that I have like a really basic sketch. You can even hardly see my lines because I went back over it with an eraser just to make sure that whenever I'm doing watercolor, my pencil isn't the main focus. I have more of a focus on my actual paint. So I did my hard lines first. I just slowly drug that white eraser over it, or I tapped it in some of the areas, and that pulled up a lot of the pencil marks so that I don't have to worry about them showing through and saying, oh, well, that's not a watercolor painting. That's more of a pencil drawing, and then you have some color over top of it. So whenever you guys are doing watercolor painting, as soon as it focuses, your major focus is to do big areas first and then to do the smaller areas. So smaller details are always later. So I'm actually going to stop from the top and then move on down to the bottom. So I'm going to be mixing up that blue-gray first, and then that kind of peachy color that goes along this tree line right in here. And I know it's really difficult to see, and it's struggling too. I'm using the exact same colors that you guys use. So this is the praying. Remember, do not be heavy-handed with these because that paper gets really sticky and messes up everything. So where'd my water go? As soon as I can find my water. There it is. Wet up my paintbrush. Grab a lot of water because you do not want dark colors. Grab a little bit of blue. And I actually got a little bit of brown / black up there already, so this is going to mix pretty well. Grab a lot more water. It is so easy to overdo your color, and then you have to go back later and you literally cannot remove watercolor. It's easier just to do layers of colors that you actually need, and you can get them back later. So I have this nice light blue-gray. Should have enough. If I don't, I can always make more. Take my brush and just start laying that in. I'm also going to think about doing my salt technique over top of this. So this is just a really wet brush. You can even see some of my whites that are popping through. Kind of. A little bit more blue. And these are just called washes. I'm doing a light little bit of color and filling in these areas. Kind of going about right here. And that's when I start bringing in that peachy color. I'm going to do a smidge more of this blue-gray mixture. I think that it is a little bit too light. Like I said, it's always easier to add it again later than doing other stuff. Don't worry about it. That looks really pretty. I'm very surprised. Okay, so if you're working on peach, you are typically going to take like an orange with a smidge of red. And a little bit more yellow, just in case. There we go. A lot of water. I don't want it to be too rich. Add that my tree line down here. I'm kind of overemphasizing some of the colors just because I want a really nice color horizon that happens over here. So once it starts touching that blue, it kind of even turns like a slight purple color. And I just keep crossing that line to make sure that it's nice and blended. And it's okay if it goes in some of the trees. I'm going to grab some water and just push that down so I don't have a really harsh line. Get that blue dot that happened right there. Another thing that you guys can do if something happens where you don't want it to be, add a lot of water, scrub at it with your paintbrush, and then just tap it and rub on it with that. Didn't get it out all the way, but I can still see that I pulled up most of it. So, there we have our sky. I wish this would stay focused. There we go. So you can see a light glazing of blue. There's a just hair of pink. And if you guys want to see this in person, you'll be able to see the colors just a little bit better. So now what I'm going to do is start mixing up the gray for my tree. So I'm going to go back and look at my picture again. You can see the colors so much better on here. I just don't want to go crazy with my colors. So when things are further away from you, they're typically darker. So that's why you have these trees back over here, back behind here, move that back over a little bit, that are darker just because this is going to catch more light because it's closer to you where the light source is. That also depends upon like where you're standing and where the light source is, but in this picture, as a general rule, whenever it's further away, it's going to get darker, okay? So I'm going to go set this back over to the side real quick, and I'm going to start focusing on my grays. So I'm going to be mixing up, I think a good color, I'm staring at this really hard, is probably a brown mixed with a lot of water with a hair of black, just to kind of mute it down. That also lets this area dry pretty well. I think I am going to add a little bit of salt up here. Just pinch, kind of rotate it, don't leave huge globbles. That'll help dry it a little bit quicker too. Okay. Good, nice and even coat. So now I'm grabbing that little bit of brown, wet up my paintbrush. That's a lot more brown than I thought. Hair of black, and a lot of water. I think I'm gonna add just a hair of blue. It's got that in the sky. Ooh, that is really pretty. Cool. So, I'm going to show you guys, you'll be able to see it a little bit better, because here is where I did a lot of the resist work with my crayon. So that's where I wanted those pure whites to be, and they should show up as soon as I start layering some of this over. So I'm only going to go to my horizon line because that's a completely different gray that I'm going to mix down there. And I think I'm also going to avoid these bushes up front, so I'm going to kind of hop around a little bit. It's okay if you guys paint on the inside of the tree trunks because that's going to be a darker color and you won't even see it. So go to that horizon line, lay down that gray. Oh, I can see some of the white popping through right here. That's pretty cool. Grab some more. Oh, I was going to skip that bush. Tap it. It's not going to be perfect. That's a-okay with me. Edges, and then start blending it up. More water. That way you can pull it really quick. And you get up to that peachy color we had made before. Grab more color. Blend it out because we don't want a harsh line. You can kind of hear some of the salt that was still left over, and that's okay. Okay, And I'm going to add just a little bit of gray up here just because we have that one really tall tree that's kind of our focal point. And blend that one out. Blend this one out. Okay, perfect. So once this decides to focus again, I'm going to drag this up a little bit closer. You can kind of see it, those little, yeah, there they are, those little white highlights. Those are where I went through with that crayon, and I said that's where I want my whites to be, so it basically stayed as a focus. So, I'm going to go over this a hair more. Some of my other whites aren't showing up. Okay. Now, I'm going to do some of my bleeding techniques. So because this is still wet down here, I'm going to go grab a little bit more of that black brown that I've been working with. Hair of blue, a little bit too strong. Cool. Now I'm just going to start tapping where I want those to go. You can see how it's kind of like fingering out. Put some down here. Oops, that's dried already. Let's give it a little bit of a help. Line it again and push it up back up to where we actually do have some water that's still standing. So sometimes with watercolor we gotta like work pretty fast. Don't freak out, you can always add more water later, but at the same time you gotta skedaddle. Okay, let's avoid the rest of that tree. And this little patch of bushes right here. Bring that to the edge and blend it on out. Add some water up here and then it'll start bleeding by itself. Okay. Add some more. Make sure this is nice and rich. I'm just tapping and pushing it around. It is just struggling to stay focused. And if any of this gets too repetitive or you're like way ahead on this, you can always skip ahead. I'll put some kind of like bookmarks on the front page so that you guys know when to like skip ahead. I'll tell you some times that you can move on. Okay. Do it on the edge of this tree. Now that that edge is dry, I'm kind of defining where that big tree is. Doesn't have to be perfect, and that's what I like about these type of pictures. You don't have to be perfect on them. That's kind of how snow just shows up, and it's imperfect, kind of just fits in with the environment. It's not going to be super important that it looks exactly like your picture, just because whenever you experience snow, it's just this sloppy, really big mess. Everybody knows that that's how it works, and you know, don't worry about it. Okay, I got most of my grays going on. I'm going to clean off my brush. Now I'm going to focus down here on the bottom. So basically, I typically work from top to bottom, just because then I can go back later, this area is dried, and then I can start adding more to it. So I kind of do this bigger section just so that I have all these different steps and I have times in between so that it can dry and basically utilize my time better. I'm not just sitting there twiddling. I'm like, oh, I gotta wait on my project. So we're gonna go get these richer colors to start adding underneath our trees. So if you remember our big tree that they had here right in the center, there was a really deep shadow under it, and then we also had that road that occurred. So I'm going to start adding in that shadow. Again, it's just a really rich blue, brown, and black mushed together, and I just didn't add as much white to it as I did up here. So doesn't matter if it crosses through the tree, because that is actually lighter than that shadow. That trunk is, or the shadow is, as compared to the trunk. It doesn't got to be perfect. I just kind of tapped out some lines right there. There's also a shadow that occurs right underneath this tree. Pull that one out, and then I'm going to start lining where my road is. It's very skinny here. Grab some more. Make sure it's nice and rich. And it's okay if it connects. And then pull it on over. You notice it gets lighter as it goes on just because it actually starts running out of the watercolor itself, all the pigments. Okay, if you want to, you can tap on the edges to make them a little bit more like fuzzy looking, so we have snow texture that's going on there. Don't have to if you don't want to. Then I'm going to grab a hair bit of water. There is another shadow that happens here, but it's actually a lot lighter, and it's okay if it connects. I'm just going to blend it off right here. Pull off some of it. So I just dried off my brush, rubbed on it right here, and then I go back, and because my brush is dry, it actually pulls up a lot of it for me. Okay, so I'm going to let this area dry now, even though now I just got a smudge over there. So as soon as this area is dry, we can come back later and add in like the other light gray values that we had been doing up here. I'm just allowing this time to darken out because I want to make sure that I get my values correct later. So it looks like most of my sky is pretty well dry. So I'm going to knock off my salt. Oh, that's beautiful. There's like little stars that happen because of the salt pulling up the color. It's so pretty. I love salt techniques. Pull it up just a little bit closer so you guys can see it. They're just so faint. They're just like little holes that happen. There it goes. It's beautiful. Okay, all the salt is off. Now, I don't really want my sky to be super dark. I just like this light texture that happened right there because of my salt. So, I'm going to focus now on doing my branches that are in between. So, if you guys have, I know this is going to sound awkward, but if you have a hairbrush or a hairdryer that you guys would want to bring in, I'm fully open to that. That actually helps you dry out these sections. The sky actually turned out better than I thought it was, so I'm not going to be worried about going back in and adding more to it. I'm going to go focus now in the middle, and I got to let a little bit of it dry, but from what I can tell, the interior of this tree is actually pretty dry except for these edges that I had painted on. So I'm going to focus on painting those. Now, because I'm doing finer detail, I'm going to go get my smaller brush. So I go from bigger brushes to smaller brushes. That helps you out with getting big areas, saving yourself a lot of time, and then I focus on the small things. So I'm going to mix up a really rich brown and black, and probably with a little bit of blue. That's one of my best combinations for making a really pretty gray. But this one, I am not going to add a lot of water to it. So lots of black. Oop, that one's purple. Okay, that one's really rich. Got that brown. That's beautiful. A little bit of blue. Here, more blue. Okay. Looks like it's ready. Clean off my brush. And whenever you guys are mixing inside your paint trays, make sure that you're not doing it with this little baby brush because you're actually going to damage the tip. These, you do not sit there and grind on them, push them past the ferrule, which is that silver part. You just sit there and lightly touch this edge to the base of the paper. Don't ever sit there and put a ton of pressure on it because these brushes are really expensive. They're normally like $2 to $3 a piece. And so for me, getting a whole entire classroom set and then seeing them all damaged, I'll cry. So please don't do that to me. So I'm going to go back. Whenever I hold my brush, I personally don't put a lot on the ferrule, which is that silver part again. I just hold it up high. I have my pinky out. This is just for me. I anchor it to the paper so that I actually have room. And then I move the brush where I need it to go. So that way I can do little flicking motions. That way I can get these really, really teeny brushes that have, or branches that occur. And it's okay if they're shaky. because they actually look like more legit branches whenever you do that. Once they get more towards the center, you're going to push a little bit harder on your brush tip, so that way it goes like this, so that you get thicker branches that occur right here. So skinnier up at the top, you're not touching the paper as much, and then when you go further down, you're going to push just a hair harder so that you guys can get those nice branches. You're also going to go back and add some more color to it. You can add it on the back side of the branch, so it looks like it's got some really cool shading on it too. So I'm just following my branches I've been working on before. Grab some more paint. Oh, that one's really pretty. Okay. Take a little bit of paint off, brush it on my paper towel, and add these. And it takes a while to build up all of your branches, and that's okay. It takes a while to build or grow trees as well, so we're just doing it slowly but surely. You can even kind of see where I had added some of these white parts of the branches. I'm sorry that the sound's going in and out. This old computer is not the best in the world. And I'm just going to do some random branches that kind of pop in and out, and that's just so that you can kind of show the snow effect that's going through. It's okay if that one fuzzed out, it's a-okay. That is the beauty of watercolors, just kind of letting it do its own thing. Okay. Now we're getting more into the base of the tree, so we got to focus on like making these branches thicker. Also go back again, still adding some value on the edges of them so they look like they're nice and thick. Looks like my bottom's dry now, so I can actually set my hand down. Set that. Cool. This is actually looking a lot better than I thought it was. I haven't practiced watercolor in a good long time. Okay, looking back at my picture again. Most of this area is actually dried, so I'm not too terribly worried about going over it now. Okay. Now, it looks like most of this is dried pretty well, so I'm going to go start on the trees over there. These ones are actually going to be a little bit lighter, just because this tree is closer to us and we can see more detail. So I'm going to have to make my branches a little bit more skinny. So focus more on your water and not going over it as much. Okay. It's kind of like a hazy, snowy morning. I used to get to see this every day back in Illinois. Like, granted, I don't miss the snow, but at the same time I love seeing it. It's just really pretty. Hated driving in it too. Okay. I am going to make it a little bit darker down here just because we're getting closer to the trunk. I add that layer in there. I actually need to do that trunk over here too. Cool. That comes down all the way to the road. I just leave some white specks in there. That way I can see like that snow's coming through on the branches. Awesome. Get some of these little negative space areas that happen in here. I'm going to tap some more black in there. And this works out really well because most of my stuff's dry, like I said, and it doesn't got to be perfect. I'm just showing some foliage back in the background. So that happens right in there. It's kind of like bushes that happen behind it. And then I'm going to fade this one out. That little white pop through, it's beautiful. Like I said, don't scrub on your brush, even though I was just doing it, shame on me. Okay. We'll zoom back on this tree trunk. That one doesn't go all the way to the horizon line, so make sure you're really careful about that. Got a little bit too much black on there. Perfect. Nice gray. Okay. Continue on with this tree. It's still a little bit wet. Be careful over there. Okay. Make this one a little bit darker. And it's okay if you guys miss parts of it or stuff like that, because like I said, all it's going to look like is that you have some snow that's popping through. It's going to look really neat, I promise. So this one actually hits a lot of the different techniques that you guys would be using for yours. So you do the dry areas where you let that dry, and then you go back over it with a wet brush, so you can add more details to it. You guys are going to have to do this a lot. It's a lot of different layers that occur. Watercolor is considered actually one of the most difficult painting mediums, and then there's some people that take to it like fish to water, and then some people they're like, oh, never again. And I don't blame you. I actually hated watercolor initially whenever I first started. I've gotten more used to it over the years. It's just a lot of practice. There's other stuff that I probably should be practicing too, but I've been kind of focused on watercolor. Just because I know that's pretty typical for a student to use those media in classroom. So I'm kind of practicing for myself, but I'm also practicing for you guys. Okay, a couple little branches back here and here. This area is almost dry now, so let's go back here on these. I think my camera is a little bit happier now that I actually have some detail, because it looks like it's staying focused a little bit better. This one has a lot more missing out of it, and that's a-okay. We're just leaving those gaps. Perfect. Okay. Looks like my bottom still needs a little bit more time, so I'm actually going to go back and start adding these really rich branches that happen down here, because it didn't catch all of it, all the snow. You can still see the bottom of the tree, so I need to go back in and add some of this richness that happens right in here. This is just going to be a stronger version of what we've been working with the tree branches here. So again, that's black, brown, and a little bit of blue. I'm going to go mix a stronger mixture of it. I think I might actually add a little bit of green to it just to be on the safe side. That's really pretty. Okay. Now because of how rich that color is, you're actually going to have to go over it a couple of times. I just kind of do like little V-shape motions, and then I do extra little flicks on it. So I just kind of do, but little teeny marks. It's okay to leave little dots around everywhere. Once you guys do those, like, you can actually tell that they're more like foliage versus you know, doing any other type of stuff versus like a branch or something like that. So there's my white that pops on through. Add some more here just by doing a little bleeding. Cool. That was beautiful. I haven't done trees in forever. I think this actually turned out better than I thought it was. So here again you can see that it's resisting. I've put that white down, so I don't gotta worry about it. It's there. I can tell I got snow on my trees. There's some more. Just rubbing over top of it, so that makes sure that I get the little negative space in between where I didn't get that colored up. V shapes. Okay, we're getting close to the bottom of the tree now. Fill that area in. So there's a lot of pre-planning that happens with watercolor, but the more that you guys practice, the easier it's going to get. There's a little bit of snow here. Make sure I catch that. Okay. I'm going to turn my arm and get back to my V motions. It's kind of like scribbling. I'm just scribbling with the top of my paintbrush. Okay. Looks like that actually reaches out pretty far, so let's go pull some of these out. It also kind of helps bleed in with some of the other layers. That little bit of negative space helps a ton, even if I didn't catch it, because it's impossible to get like all the little baby teeny dots with that crayon tip. But man, this looks really nice. I'm very surprised. Okay. Next layer here. Looks like I'm getting to about where I should be. I'm just adding a little bit here and there on the edges of some of these branches. You don't have to cover them all. Just so that I can tell that this is a nice and full tree, but I leave a lot of white left behind just so I can tell also that I got it snow covered. Got a little bit of wetness on my arm again. Just wipe it right on off, because otherwise you're going to transfer it to another part of your picture and you don't want that. Now, up on the top of the tree there is some, but the problem is that there is a lot of snow coverage just because of how skinny it is, so the white shows up better than the branches themselves. So just add a little bit to it, make them a little bit fuzzy. Let's kind of tap it or do the V shapes, but really skinny ones. That was a little bit too rich. That's okay. And then just leave the rest. Got a little bit more that happens right in here. Push that around with my V shapes, connect it to the tree. Actually, I think we're getting pretty close to done with this guy. So what you guys are going to start mixing up now is basically your gray for your trees. That'll happen behind these. There's not going to be as much, and like I said, I'm focused on this guy, so that's where I added the most detail. I'm going to let all this dry, and then I'm going to add more value to it. It's really difficult to see like the different colors that I'm choosing, but as soon as I'm actually finished and you guys have time in class and you are painting, just call me over and I'll show you guys my picture so that you can actually see these different values that are occurring. So I'm just going to go back and start pulling out that blue-green that I had been working on, or no, blue-gray. Get it all nice and water-filled. Go back with my teeny brush now and start adding in that detail. Doesn't gotta be perfect. I'm doing a lot of scribbling. But I'm also grabbing a lot of water. I think I might actually do this with my bigger brush. It'll go a little bit quicker. May not catch as much detail, but that's okay. Tap that in there and make it darker. So the bigger your brush, the more color you got in there too. Fade it off. So you notice I kind of like lay it down and it actually picks up some of it, and that even helps us too. Just kind of tap up here, and it kind of like fake looks like we have leaves that are going on, but we're not doing all that extra detail. And then fade it down here to these guys. Okay. We can always go back later and add more details to actually make it look like we spent a ton of time on it, but we didn't spend a ton of time on it. I'm going to go get this negative space on this tree just to help define it. It is a little bit lighter. Catch the background behind it. And then fade it, so you notice I'm pushing it and laying it down underneath this guy. Pull it, help define that edge, and we're going to fade it out up here. Add some more water, blend it down. So you can kind of see the edge of a tree that's happening right there, but at the same time, I didn't spend a ton of time on it. Let's go back and add some of these branches. Tap it off on my paper, make it a little bit lighter. I'm leaving some of that space in there so I can see that beautiful peach popping through. And rub it on down, get these trees defined. Grab some more, and then start working on these trees. So because it's kind of like dusky, mid-morning, whatever, these will be a little bit darker than that peach color that pops through. Pull it on down, right to that bush we had been working on before. Tap some other stuff, bleed it on in, and then gotta be perfect. Right up here, final edges of our trees. Oh, you guys are able to see too. And blend it on down, pull some water, and smooth it on out. Cool. So because this area down here should be nice and dry now, I'm going to push that up so you guys can see. We're going to go lay in some of those grays. I still have this one that's a little bit wet. I'm just going to tap it. Okay, so from what I'm seeing from our picture, I just see pretty much straight gray, which means I have black and a lot of water. But I don't have a lot of that black at all. So I have that black and that water mixed all together. Go on the edge of our line there, pull it on over, grab a little bit more, pull it on over. And I also did some of the negative space with our resist. Again, that's right over there. Pull more color, drag it on over. And it's okay if you miss some of the areas. Like having more of the white that pops through kind of adds like a little bit of texture, and it's pretty cool. So I'm going to scrub this one out because that was one of my mistakes. Just fade it a little bit. That looks pretty good. Go back, add a couple little texture lines because most of it's dried already. Now I'm going to go back and focus on some of these bushes while I let all this area dry up here. So if I go back underneath my big one, I just see a little bit of gray. Grab this, a little bit of green. So I mixed a black with a little bit of green. It's kind of in the medium value range. I'm going to use my teeny brush and kind of just keep doing those scribbling motions. Just fill in that area behind it. That's what I love about doing snow. You can just pretty much scribble everywhere. I love doing that. Saves me time and it actually looks fairly decent, at least in watercolor. Okay. Okay, some of these guys under here, they do have some value, so let's add that in on our horizon line. This big bush right here. A little bit that happens there. It's really dark at the bottom just because the top has caught a lot of snow. Make sure I get that nice and rich. So I added basically a lot less water on this one. That's just something that I've been saving. That one I think was actually this guy, but that's okay. Pull it on the edge of our horizon line. Kind of scribble. Add some more. That way it's nice and rich. There's a little bit of darkness that happens up top. It's only like a couple little areas. Catch them real quick. Got one or two right up here. Cool. Not as dark, but there's another little copse of bushes that happen right here. So I'll go back to my lighter gray that I had made with a little bit of green in there. Add that just by scribbling as well. I kind of go around the edges of the bush just to help define it a little bit more, the one that we'd worked on previously. And do my scribble motions. Doesn't gotta be perfect, just gotta get it done. Darker at the bottom, typically lighter at the top. Okay. Got all those done. Bottom's still a little bit damp from what I can feel. So now, I'm going to focus on this tree that I kind of neglected that happens right in here. It has a lot of white that happens here at the bottom, so I'm not going to focus too terribly much on it, but I'm going to repeat these exact same motions, but with a lighter value. So I'm going to take up that blue-green gray that I made up before, and add just a little bit more water to it. This is the exact same color that I just used right here. Okay, and now we're going to do the exact same motions. It's those little scribbles that happen, the little V shapes. Don't gotta catch everything. Oh, there's some white that popped through that I saved. That looks nice. There isn't much on this side of the tree. I'm going to leave it a little bit looser. It means just lesser scribbles and lesser value. It's definitely a hair darker on this side, so that's where I'm going to keep going at it. And then pull it on up. Added a little bit more water just to make sure I can start diluting it so that it can blend up into the sky. Got those V motions. A little bit more water, a little bit too dark. And then fade it on back out. Ooh, wrong one. I almost grabbed that darker one that I had been working with before. That's a no thanks. Okay, that one's all cut out. Got some pretty nice value within it. It's harder to see on the video, I understand. This tree is actually fairly dry. I'm going to tap out a couple of areas real quick. I'm going to go do my second layer. So if I go back and look at this picture, my kind of like hot spots of where it's really dark, I have a lot of darkness here, I have a lot of darkness right here, and I have another spot right here. So one, kind of two right in here, and this third one back in here. So I'm going to focus on adding more value into those with my V shapes again, and I'm not going to worry so much about the other areas. I'm just going to kind of leave them. So because of how transparent or see-through watercolor is, that is how you can get like different steps of value without actually sitting there and like, oh, I'm going to add this one to it and I'm going to bleed it in. Oh, I'm going to do this. No, save your time, let it dry, and just paint over it with the exact same color. You do not have to keep making repetitive colors over and over and over and over and over again. That's a waste of your time. Don't do it, save yourself some time, and be easy peasy. Okay, got almost all of my 3 hot spots. Okay, cool. Got a couple more here and there, just little baby dashes of detail. don't have to be a ton. Just doing a little bit here and there, adding a little bit of value on that side. Okay. I'm going to go back to my road now since my bottom's pretty dry. Now before we had been working with a brown and a black with a little bit of blue that I had mixed back in there. So I'm going to grab that color again with my small brush. Only going to focus on the road. I'm not worried about the shadows, and I just tap that in there. You're going to have to go back a couple of times just because of how small this brush is and how much water it cannot carry. That includes your pigments, and then follow this on the bottom side. Just because the sunlight's coming from up here, if it's further away from the sun, it gets darker at the bottom. And then later on, I'll come back and blend it on up. That was nice. I got a little bit of texture that happened right there. Grab some water on the exact same brush. And then it kind of pushes and blends it. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just got to have that different change in value, and basically everybody's going to buy it. Looks like a real picture. Okay, so we got that little bit of value in here on the edge of our road. I'm going to add a little bit more value into the snow that happens right here. So we go back to our really light mixture of blue and a hair of black. Grab my teeny brush, fill it back up. Then I'm just going to do some scribble motions. I'm going to focus more back here just because our sun's up here. Further away it goes, I'm going to have it down here at the bottom. Got to go back a lot for it just because this is really light. And scribble that in there. Okay. Add some more water. My brush is getting a little bit dry. Go back to some of the shadows that I had done before and just kind of scribble within them too. That way we got a little bit more texture going on. Okay, those are all done. Now with that beautiful blue gray that we've been working on up here and in the background of all the trees, I'm going to go grab some more of that. Oops. This time I will have to suck it up buttercup and do it with a small brush. Can't keep dealing with the big brush doing all the work for me. Grab a lot of water. Go back here. That area is still a little bit wet, but that's okay. I'm just going to scribble within it. So because this area is still wet, I can actually bleed it. If that works for you, do it. If not, just let it dry. And then you'll start getting basically what we've been doing up there. Just these little fingerlets that happen. I'm just scribbling. Just scribbling. That helps add some like texture. You can tell that there are leaves that are still there. But also, they just kind of fade. You don't go all the way up to where we had been working before. You just leave it a little bit lower. That way we buy that that tree is catching light because of where it's coming back from this side, and so the lighter ones are on the edge, they're closer to our sun, and then the darker ones are further away. Go back here, add some of that, smoosh it on out. Got those V motions going on because this is one of the trees that's semi closer. Don't have to add a ton of detail. Just gotta scribble it on out. Darker on the left. Not as much up top. If it gets dark, just drop some water on it. Keep on going. Cool. These guys, not gonna add as much detail. We're going back to our scribble motion that we've been working on over here. Tuck it on the edge of the tree. Back to our scribbles. brush is starting to dry out. I am not going to add a ton. I really just kind of want it to phase into like what we've been working on over there. I don't really want to add too terribly much. Okay. A little bit too dark, so I just grab some more water. We are about like 98% done. I just want to tackle this one bush again real quick. That darker green gray one that we had been working on. Add some more to that. So I go back to that color, that green gray. And then just like this guy, don't have to do anything different, just add more. So that you guys can see the texture a little bit better of the branches that come down. Not going to do it all. Darker at the bottom, lighter at the top. Cool. I'm going to let this dry, and then whenever you guys would like to see it in person, please, please, please let me know. If you need any help with watercolor itself, let me know. There's also techniques if you guys aren't like really comfortable adding a ton of detail in with watercolor. I can even show you how to do just like a really simple glazing of color over top, and we can actually add color pencil over top of it. So if you're more comfortable with adding in detail and color pencil, just let me know. These will look awesome, I promise. So if you guys need any other help or any other materials, please let me know. I am so glad that we are working on these together. Thank you.